Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to offer a warm welcome to any visitors here today. If you don't know me, my name's Father Ed Herzog. I serve as chaplain and director of campus ministry here. It's great to be with you folks as we celebrate this I guess, a little anticipation of St. John Henry Newman's birthday here in a couple of days, right here in the context of Heritage Month. So it's great to have you all here on campus and hopefully sharing some high tea with us here later this afternoon. One of the works of stewardship that I do in the diocese is I am a leader, and in fact I'm the priest leader for the retreats that we put on for couples who are engaged or discerning marriage in the Catholic Church. So I'm the one who helps put those things on. And over the course of the weekend, couples, they have an opportunity to just ask anonymous questions. They can submit it in the app and we get it all. And one of the things that has come up time and time again is when someone will submit a question, they'll say, Father, my fiance is Catholic, but I'm not. And I'm thinking about converting. Because I think it would be really nice if we both come from the same faith background. Just make things a lot easier. Right? For us, we could go to the same church on Sundays. We can raise our kids with the same values. I think that might be a good idea for me. And something like that will come up, or maybe it's just like I'm feeling pressure from my spouse, or maybe from my fiance, or from my fiance's family to convert. They'll say, what guidance do you have for me? And the thing that I'll tell them is that, I think it's admirable that you want to share the same faith background as your fiance, as God willing, your future spouse. Respectfully, I don't think that's a good reason to convert, though. In fact, I begin every time my OCIA class of individuals who are discerning becoming Catholic, discerning making a profession of faith. My first class, as I tell them, I tell that story. I say, I think that's respectable. I don't think it's a good reason. Because I think there's only one good reason to become Catholic. And that's because you think it's true. Period. End of story. And the reason why I say this is because, to me, that is what summed up St. John Henry Newman. He followed the truth. St. John Henry Newman, in the 19th century, when he lived, he had everything. He lived a great life of comfort. He was an Oxford man. Oxford. It was Harvard before Harvard existed. Right? He was a man who had a tenured position. He had an audience who listened to his sermons every single Sunday. Everything. He had all of these great comforts. But again, as he found himself right in this movement called the Oxford movement, he began reading the Church Fathers. And to his horror, he began to think, maybe the Catholics are right. And if you read his stories, he did not want them to be right. He didn't. But again, he continued to follow the truth, right? Knowing full well that it was going to invite a whole series of problems into his life. But again, I think it's fitting, again, almost providential, that today, in the context of the celebration that we have, we hear this reading. Right? I think for him, right, St. John Henry Newman, he had to take up his cross. He realized that the Lord was calling him against all odds, against the comfort, against the prestige, right, against the positional authority that he had, that was calling him into the Catholic Church. And again, I think these words would have really rung true to him, right? Whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, because what profit? What profit is there to gain the whole world if that means forfeiting myself? Right? St. John Henry Newman, he was willing to go and to take up the cross. And I think it's fitting for us, right, again, as we find ourselves, right, on this journey of Lent, right, what is Lent but us on pilgrimage towards the centerpiece of our faith? That Good Friday. Right, when Christ tells us that on this Lenten journey, we too, right, are to pick up our cross, to go with him to Calvary. But the beauty of this, and I think we see this in the life of St. John Henry Newman too, is that it's not the end of the story. When we, and again, this is the paradox of life, Right? The paradox that only makes sense. Again, it's not one of those things that makes logical sense, but it makes experiential sense. When it's lived, we get it. Right? And what is the central paradox at the heart of all of reality? That life comes through death. I say this to my students all the time. If you want to understand that, go to the gym and work out. That's me. I realize that in going in there, I have to sacrifice. I have to embrace the difficulty of that reality. Right? That again, going into Genesis to work out is never something pleasurable. But coming out, I become a new man. And I think that's what we found with St. John Henry Newman. Losing all of those things, right? Him taking up the cross, him losing his life, he found it. And I think for us, as we find ourselves on this pilgrimage, yes, towards Good Friday, but ultimately what we can find is that Good Friday is not the end of the story. It is Easter Sunday. Right? It's when we lay down our life, when we pursue the one who says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. When we pursue that to its end, as St. John Henry Newman did, God willing, one day, might not be doctors of the church, but one day, maybe we too could be called saints.